So hello everyone. It is July 16th, 2019. This is the second part of the 1.16.0 alpha 1 release. So before we start, again, this is a meeting that will be recorded and on the internet for posterity. So please be mindful of what you say. Please be sure to adhere to the Kubernetes code of conduct, and in general, just be excellent to each other, right? So in part one, we ended on staging the release, right? There is a little scratch pad that we were working off of to just toss our ideas in. So I'm going to share that in the chat one more time. And we kind of took a break to go to the SIG release meeting. So welcome back. I will pull up my screen one more time and quit Slack before I do that. All right, cool. So back to the directions. We're going to kick off so we finished the stage section, and I verified that the stage is actually complete. We can see that if we go to the console and wait for it to load. And okay, so we see that, so we mentioned before that we saw that the first stage had failed, right? And the reason, we'll poke at that one more time. The reason that failed was because it was searching for a green build, right? And it couldn't find a green build because early in the cycle, we tend to have some build failures that need to be cleaned up, right? So we can see right here, it says, unable to find a green set of test results, right? So we were saying that that's pretty good, that our release tooling provides some safeties there to prevent us from releasing when our dashboards are not good, right? So the second time around, we kicked off the Anago stage pre-build, blah, 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 instead with the build at head flag, right? So that build at head flag just says, ignore the checks for a green test. What I want you to do instead is just take the head of the branch that of the repo that I'm referencing and go to work building it, right? So that's what happened here. It took about 49 minutes and 12 seconds, right? So there are a few housekeeping things that we need to do, right? And part of that is creating so this bookkeeping thing right here, creating a release issue, right? So we're going to kick off, what I'm going to do is we're going to kick off the release stage of it, because I think it takes a variable amount of time, and that variable amount of time I'm unsure of. So we'll kick that off first, and then we'll come back and we'll start filling out the cut a release issue. Normally for branch managers, anyone who's listening to this, do not do it in these steps. Make sure you open the cut a release issue first and log the appropriate metrics and links before doing that. I'm just doing that for the sake of this call. All right, so alpha release, right? We are at the point where we are going to take the artifacts that we staged. We're going to take the things that we did in the previous step, and we're actually going to push the button to make it turn into a Kubernetes release, right? So if we take a look at this build log, right, towards the end, so we can see we were kind of going through this before, and we made it to the make cross step, right? So if we kind of see that through to completion, right, you can see that, so let's just walk through this really quick, right? So make cross was successful. It's going to start building the alpha tree, essentially, right? So you can see it's checking out 1.16 alpha 1. And sorry, I know that this is small, so let's make that screen a little bigger. Right, so at this point, it's starting to do a few things like packaging up the tarballs for various architectures, building the Docker images for the associated Kubernetes components, so API server, controller manager, scheduler, proxy, and the cloud controller manager. right? And making sure that those are tagged appropriately with 1.16.0-alpha.1, right? And tagging that to where we're going to be pushing it to. So GCR Kubernetes release test, and then the tag, right? So going, and doing the same for multiple architectures, right? And when that's done, it's generating a set of release notes for 1.16, right? So this is something that we go through several times throughout the cycle. The release notes team will go through this several times throughout the cycle to make sure that these are appropriate notes, and verifying that with the SIGs. So, we've had some changes to the way we do release notes. So we now have a release note site, relnotes.kates.io, which aggregates some of this from a JSON document instead. So there is going to be kind of a split brain scenario where we have stuff that we manage within the repo for the changelog, and then also maintaining this JSON document for the changelog. I don't have all of the details on that, but if you speak to Jeff or Sasha or Lindsay, they would. Right. So finally, you can see we're pushing the binary release artifacts, right? So there is a GCS stage bucket, and that's being pushed into a 1.16.alpha.1 location, right? So if I was to, I wonder if I have access to see this. Let's find out. Ooh, no. Right, so this is a, was it GSUtil ls, and then that bucket location. Right, so we can see the stage worked. We've got stuff, right? And it's we've got a set of tarballs with the associated MD5, SHA-1, and SHA-512 hashes. A bin directory and an extra directory. So if we want to see what's in that extra directory, GCE, and anything in GCE, yeah, right. So configurations for the master, the node, and shutdown scripts, as well as some Windows artifacts, and again the associated MD5, SHA-1, and SHA-512 hashes for those artifacts. Now, if we check out this bin directory, you can see that we've got binaries for, again, multiple architectures, and this will probably go out into, yeah, so let's do AMD 64 just for an example, right? And again, the components and their associated hashes, right? So, that kind of maps with, if we open up that artifacts document, we can see that this kind of maps to the Docker images that we said we would have, the binaries that we said we would have, and so on and so forth, and these extra files, right? So all of that said, I'm feeling pretty good about it. So let's take this command that the output gives you. And what this is going to do is basically we're taking a build number. So this is head at the time that we ran that stage, right? So the truncated SHA for that for head at the time, as well as like a build number. And so this mentions alpha.0. Alpha.0 will become .1 essentially. We essentially promote that one of those build numbers into the next alpha or the next beta release or the next RC, depending on the stage we are in the release cycle. So any questions on that before I kick this off?
Nope, go for it.
Cool. Boom. Away we go. Right. So again, GCB Manager has done something similar to what we saw last time. it basically takes it wraps Anago, right, and sends off a command to Google Cloud Build, right? So if we wanted to do it with Anago instead, this would be the command that we would run, right? But since we're submitting to Cloud Build, it doesn't really matter much, right? If I wanted to do this on my local, I could have run this command instead, right? And Anago would go forth and start doing Anago stuff, right? So we can dig into Anago a little bit as this is running, and after we do our housekeeping, right? So this is the actual release, right? And loading logs, waiting for that. Okay, that may take a little bit. But you can see it's kicked off. So over to ever important housekeeping, right? So we said in the document that before we kick this stuff off, we should be making sure that we are opening a cut release issue in SIG release. So the issue template will describe in painful detail what kind of things you should be collecting, right, to say that we're cutting a release, right? So let's fill some of this out, right? So we're cutting 1.16.0-alpha.1, right? Scheduled to happen. So normally, as we get later in the cycle, this is something that would happen ahead of time, right? Tuesday, July 16th, because I have no idea what day it is, right?
Is this for bookkeeping purposes? So that one release manager tells the other release managers what they were dealing with?
Yes, yes. So this gives us an opportunity to, it's definitely bookkeeping. It's also like if we need to, so we've got a few release managers that span across multiple time zones. Say you need to drop this task, right, and do something different. It gives people an opportunity to pick up where you left off, right?
Yeah, good point.
Yeah. So we've had an opportunity really to have a little tighter feedback around some of this stuff by having the Slack channel, right? So the release management Slack channel. So people have been really great about popping into the Slack channel. Hey, I'm starting up this release. Let's and kind of doing the coordination there instead of via DMs, right? So let's do what it says. And, one of the things is we want to snapshot masters unhealthy boards, right? So let's go to master blocking. And currently we've got one failing, a few flaky, and the rest passing, right? So we're just going to grab that. And let's get informing too, right? So informing, a lot more ominous, but we're moving these tests out. I don't think I will be able to capture everything on my screen, so let's make that a little smaller. That works. Let's say that works. Right. Or you know what? Let me tighten up the snapshot a little bit. And right. Okay, right. So let's toss some screenshots in. Let's just create the issue first, right? And then we'll go back and start editing some stuff, right? So 1 and 2, that's a weird sound. Okay. And we can say that's done. And now let's go back and edit this. And just look through the instructions again. Okay, so we notified SIG release. I announced that this call was happening, so I will consider that my notification. Collect metrics, links, add them as comments. Let's see what that looks like. Again, I should preface all of this with this is the first time I'm officially doing this. So I'm learning as you are. Right. Okay. Yeah, we can do that. So this is a beta 0 that he cut. And I can grab that. So again, we'll come back and edit this. I just want to make sure I have the template in there first. And we want to mention, Dims, do you know if this will take after I update a comment? I'm not sure.
What do you mean?
Because so like it had a milestone command, right?
Yeah.
And I'm editing it. I don't know if it takes afterwards.
Yeah,
Like,
it'll take, I think. We'll
okay.
try.
Yeah,
Yeah.
we'll find out. We'll
Yeah.
find out together, right? So, and then it mentions the build and publish of the debs and RPMs, right? This only happens for the official release. This is when we contact the build admins, so Alexandra or Linus or Sumi, right? And we'll contact them in the channel, or we'll reach out to Kubernetes release managers at googlegroups.com to request the debs or RPM builds, right? The reason for this is there are some key signing things that happen, and you know, the debs and RPMs are actually published to a repo that is to apt and yum repos that are managed by Google currently. So we're in the process of talking about what the design looks like for CNCF infra hosted apt and yum repos. So that conversation is happening right now. Once that is done, we'll start to mock out what that flow looks like and start switching over the locations for where we're landing artifacts. Okay. So it looks like we're almost done here. So what I'll do here is I will assign myself, and I will also CC release managers, which is I'll CC release engineering, right? So release managers is a GitHub team. So actually, maybe it's valuable for me to just poke at these really quickly, right? So org, right? So Kubernetes orgs. So Kubernetes, Kubernetes SIGs, Kubernetes client, Kubernetes incubator, Kubernetes security, not security actually. Use a configuration, or maybe security does, but we can't see it. Uses a configuration tool for GitHub called Parabolas or Peribolus or something. I never got the pronunciation right, but it's a tool that we wrote up, lives in Prow, and allows you to specify a config for the GitHub org, right? So this is things like the name of the org, the company, the description, whether or not you can have repo and org projects, what the default permissions are, who can create repositories, and then it breaks it into a set of members, admins, and then associated teams, right? So let's look at really quickly. Let's just look at the teams for. I was like, let me make sure I kicked off. Okay, I did kick off the build, just checking. So let's look at really quickly the configuration for Kubernetes, and more specifically, the configuration for SIG release, right? So within teams, we've got a few different teams. Build admins, as I was mentioning, they're the set of Googlers with access to published packages, yada, 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 right? These are the people associated to it. And I also include the SIG chairs, so Caleb, myself, and Tim Pepper, here for the sake of notifications, right? So this group has no special access on GitHub permissions-wise, like repo permissions-wise, outside of notifications. It's meant to do notifications. So I want to make sure that the SIG chairs are being notified on the same things that the build admins are, right? There's the licensing subproject, right? So we've got DIMS here, Nikita, myself, and Steve Winslow. Milestone maintainers. Milestone maintainers are people who can apply the milestone or status commands. I think status is dead though, right? So we probably need to update this comment. And it gives people write access to the Kubernetes enhancements repo. The reason for that is so that they can edit the descriptions of the enhancement tracking issues that they may not have created, right? So lots of people in this group. There's coverage for, there should be at least one person from every SIG within this group to apply the milestones for their respective SIGs, as well as the release team leads, some of the roles on the release team, right? So communications, we've got the enhancements role in here, bug triage, CI signal, lead shadows, right? The patch release team, right? So the patch release team is also notifications based, doesn't grant any permissions right now. This is just like, hey, patch release team, we want to, like, can you tell us when 1.15.1 is coming out, right? So anyone on the call wondering when 1.15.1 is coming out is going to be Thursday. If you are not aware of when our releases come out in general, we have a pretty page called patch releases, right? Patchreleases.md, so sig release /releases/patch releases.md, right? And we keep a table. We keep a set of tables up to date here, right? So once we set a date, we'll PR changes to these tables. And also once we cut a new minor release, we'll also update this, right? To let you know, so 1.12 is no longer supported. That update happened recently once we kicked out 1.15. So back to the teams, right? So we can see the release engineering team here is, so we've got the patch release team, we've got the publishing bot reviewers. So those are people who have, who do reviews for publishing bot, which is responsible for taking code that lives in Kubernetes staging, right, and bringing that into individual repos so that we can import it in our Go code without having to import all of Kubernetes, right? I think that was the really rudimentary explanation of it. There's lots of doodads and gizmos that DIMS could go into in excruciating detail if we needed to. So there's also the release engineering team. This is the one that we actually care about for the sake of this call. And that includes members of the release engineering subproject, and it includes everyone who is either a build admin, patch release team, branch managers, or the release managers associates, right? I think it also includes the SIG chairs, yes, right? So, so Tim Pepper, myself, Caleb Miles, and then we've got patch release, and we're also commenting what these people are responsible for, right? So the patch release team are also sub-project owners for release engineering. So that's mentioned here. And then everyone else's associated roles, right? So build admin and release manager associate, so on and so forth. The release managers team, right? The release managers team does have special access, right? This one allows people, this one gives you write access to Kubernetes, right? This is So this is one that we guard very carefully. You can see that the Kate's release robot is in this one. The Kate's release robot, actually, if you were part of the previous call, you would have seen that we have a, what the hey, I will show it one more time, right? We have this stage.yaml under GCB in the release, release repo. And remember, I had mentioned that we have a key in KMS for the Kubernetes release robot that has the GitHub token associated to it, right? And again, this token is base64 encoded. It's a base64 encoded encrypted blob, right? So I'm not exposing credentials right now, just showing you that for the sake of the video. So by giving the case release robot access to this team, we are essentially granting our build process access to cut releases, do make changes in GitHub on behalf of the release managers group, right? So the other people who are in here are the branch managers and the patch release team. Notice that it's only the branch managers, only the patch release team for now, right? You'll notice that none of the release manager associates are part of this group, right? So again, as I mentioned before, we want to make sure that we are building a level of trust and within the community by building out this team. So people who prove that they are actively participating to SIG release, care about the health and innovation of the release engineering processes, will be people who will be considered to move into these teams that have that kind of access, right? But again, we do not remove users who are not actively doing this job, right? So only people who are actually going to be cutting releases are going to be part of this team, right? This team is also for when we're doing patch releases. You can see that, right? So if I was to go to the Kubernetes repo and check out issues, or let's do, right, pull requests, right? So if I look for pull requests with a do not merge label, right? Cherry pick not approved, right? So this is another reason that this that team is important, right? So when someone submits a cherry pick, right, we have a script that runs that allows you to automatically generate cherry picks based on PR numbers, right? So it'll give you a little message like this, tell you where the cherry pick is coming from, and where I'm cherry picking it to, and a quick description of what the thing actually does, right? But when you open one of these issues, it will automatically, the CI robot will automatically do this, right? It'll say, hey, you're not doing this for the master branch, so it must be a cherry pick, right? And this cherry pick was not approved yet, right? So I'm going to add this do not merge cherry picked not approved label, right? So you can see from my screen, because I'm not in the release managers team right now, I don't have access to this label, right? Compared to, let's take anything on release issues, right? So I open this myself, right? And I have access to directly edit the labels because I'm a repo admin here. Well, we can see that that's also true if I do this from someone else's, right? Someone else's PR, right? Right. So clear that I do not have access on the Kubernetes repo, but someone who did would be able to come in and swap this label, right? So the patch release manager is also responsible for vetting the fact that this is a cherry pick that should go into a patch release, right? And some of the reasons for doing that are it's fixing a critical bug, or we introduced a regression in Kubernetes that was fixed in master branch and it needs to be cherry picked back, right? Cherry picks should not introduce new features. They should not introduce vendor changes optimally, assuming that the vendor change isn't required to fix said critical bug fix or regression, right? So it's up to the patch release manager. Again, this is a reason why there's an additional need for vetting the people who come into this role, right? Because the patch release manager needs to make this kind of call, right? Is this something that we should actually approve to cherry pick into the next patch release, right? So any questions on any of that stuff? Okay. All right. So release team, and we can speed through now. Release team leads. SIG release is a general group for people who are coming into the release team. It's essentially our @ channel, right? For GitHub. So that's that for the teams. And let's float back to this issue, right? So the reason I said all of that stuff is because we're going to tag release engineering. So everyone who is working on the release managers group is aware, and I'm assigning myself, and we're just going to update that comment. Does it take? I guess not. And I'll come in and clean this up later after we check durations and stuff like that. But that's stuff that we don't need to do for this call. So let's go back to that branch manager handbook and see where we're at, right? So we ran this command, right? And question for the class, anybody know what we did, not wrong, but different from what an actual release would look like? Okay. So let's go back to cloud build. And all will be revealed soon, right? So we saw that this took 18 minutes and was successful. So just scrolling through the logs very quickly, right? So it said, I'm done, I did it. Anago did all your stuff. We archived the release on GCS. We updated the releases page. So let's see if some of that is actually true.
So Stephen,
Yep.
you don't add the tag. This Anago job adds the tag.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep. So did it do something? Let's find out. So no, it didn't do anything. Like what happened, right? What did we do wrong? All right, so let's try. Anybody? Any last chance for guesses? Okay, all right. So by default, and if you go back to the if you go back to the playbook, it gives you the answer, right? By default, all of the Anago are GCB manager commands, and a lot of the things that are in our release tooling will run as a mock, a dry run, right? So,
No mock. Okay, got
all
it.
right, so we have to supply this no mock flag to make sure that we actually do the things that we said we wanted to do, right? So this gives us an opportunity. Again, this is another fail-safe while we're running through the release process, which is especially helpful as we start to onboard more people into this thing, like me, right? That we don't release when we don't mean to, right? So now we mean to, and we're actually going to hit the button. Yes, I actually want to do that, right? So see, it even gives you, hey, we're really going to do this now. And I'm sorry if people couldn't see my screen, but I'll just make that a little bigger. So yes, I do want to do a no mock, right? So one more time off the GCB, right? And we see that, so we can see just by the history that's, close that, close this. Right, so the stage part took 49 minutes and 12 seconds. The release part, the mock part of the release took 18 minutes and 46 seconds, right? So all told, we're looking at close to like, an hour and 10 minutes or so, right? Different parts of the release cycle will take different amounts of time, right? So because we're doing an alpha release, there's nothing too crazy going on. But once we hit beta, beta also prepares, like we've gotten to the point where we're doing a branch cut, right? So beta does some additional wizardry that we can actually, let's dig into that. Let's go find out what it's doing, because it looks like we've got 18 minutes to spare, 19 minutes to spare before this is done, hopefully, right? Fingers crossed. So over here, looking at Inago, where do we start? Where do we start? Maybe it's helpful to take a look at some of the things that we're bringing in, some of the things that we're sourcing as we run Inago, right? So one of the probably the more important ones is release lib .sh, right? And let's check that out, right? So we can see some of what this is doing, right? If there is a job cache, it's going to try to pull the results from the job cache, right? Check if a build number exists and do some JQ wizardry on it, and pop out a temporary JSON file that has that information, right? There's also a function for setting the build version. So this is essentially what goes into that full tag that you saw on GCB, right? So this bit right here, right? All of this extra, right? So it's truncating the head of the branch. It is, what else is it doing? Release man. Okay. Right, and you can see all of these flags here that are getting. So I have shell check on in my because of all of our shell check debacles. I have added shell check to my extensions for VS Code, right? So we can kind of dip in and see some of the shell check mistakes that we may or may not be making. Like this is an unused variable. You know, certain things we actually may want to mask the return values, so that's fine, right? But we need to make sure that it's ignored in shell check or excluded, right? So one of the things you may notice as you go through this code is these flags, these flag underscores, right? So these flags are dynamically assigned, and we often don't know what the value of them are until the run gets going in GCB or in Prow per se, right? So so remember we had these additional tags here and some configurations here. So build at head, no mock. So these underscore variables are ones that are leveraged inside of GCB, right? And get interpreted to whatever you've got set in your environment, right? So release tool repo will map to underscore release tool repo and branch and so on and so forth, right? So it's translating all of these actual Nago commands, including the no mocks and the official and build version and all that stuff, into variables that are either assigned or not assigned within GCB, right? And you can see some of the logic here. If this is, if official exists or RC exists, this will conflict. They can't be that can't happen at the same time. If the official flag is set, it'll set. If this flag is set, it'll set an official tag, and so on and so forth. So there's lots of wizardry that happens that makes the build a little different from if you were to run it locally with a certain set of flags, as opposed to passing it into GCP. So I guess release lib is kind of short and sweet. So short and sweet, quote unquote. So let's go back to oh, this is GCP manager. I was like, I remember this being longer, yeah. So let's try to track down what it does for certain branches, right? So we're looking for a cross build tree, stage location. So one of the things it's eventually going to do is update the Git release, right? And let's look at, what do we want to find out? Let's look at the no mock stuff, right? Right. So right here we see that it's asking you, is this the real deal, right? So if no mock is not set, right? If the flag, if that's set, it will do. So we have a common library that will ask yes or no for certain things, or this will have a common exit with an exit code of 1. And at this point, we're entering, so let's see, when we enter push get objects. Okay. Okay.
What were you looking for, Stephen? The beta cutting the branch?
Yeah, I started going off on a tangent in my head, actually. Yes, the beta cutting of the branch is actually what we should have been looking for. So let's see. It's based on the version number, right? So build version. And okay, let's start with build version. And let's also make sure that I'm wondering if this is something that will happen automatically as, ooh, okay. Back to that in a moment. Let's find out why this failed. Releasing from requires stage build. Okay, so it's saying we don't have stuff that I think we're supposed to have. I wonder if this is even in this project. Should be.
It's looking for it in Kubernetes dash release.
Yeah. That's the question. Do I have access to that? Let's just try release. Come on. Okay. I go GCS write, stage, release. It's probably release. Archive. Oh, that's probably going to take a while. Okay. Archive, and I'll go. Oh. Yeah, tell me what's in it. So what happened here? Did the log not write? Was this because, I'm wondering now, when we ran the stage, we also ran the stage, we didn't specify no mock on the stage. So I wonder, are the things that are supposed to be there or not there? Stage build it head. Right, so maybe a documentation fail that this also should be a no mock.
Interesting.
Yeah, so I'm not sure that I want to keep you all for another hour to wait for the stage to happen. Let me scanning through this one more time.
It does say any command without no mock is a dry run, right? So that should include.
Yeah, with the stage, right?
Okay.
Well, that's a bummer. I'm hoping we could have showed you something. Um,
Do you have the output from that run? Where?
yeah. Hold on.
Let's go look there and see what log says.
All right. So supposedly something should be here, over here. Ooh.
Is there a dash R on the ls command, that recursive?
It should be fine with just the slash at the end.
Okay.
I'm wondering if bucket plus, let's just see what we got here. So we're getting alpha.1. That's odd. Well, this is in GCB archive. right? And the Inago log is there too. That's going to be long. Why did I do that? So this is the same log we were just looking at.
It says mock run skipping on the update GitHub release. That line.
Yep. Okay, so it looks like we need to do this again.
And update the page also, right?
Yes, update the page. So all right, so I'll kick that off in the meantime. Let's see. So GCP manager without arguments should list the last 5 jobs. I'll give you an idea of who ran them. This is all messed up. I have to figure out what messed this up. But you can see this one had a no mock. This one was head stage, but does not mention a no mock, right? So we know what we did.
Right.
Right.
So before I let you go, you are running this in a Ubuntu VM, not on your Mac.
I'm running it. I have an Ubuntu machine.
Oh,
so
okay.
I'm running it. I'm just running it locally, but you can run it in a VM. What I would like to do is, I think there are suggestions about a Docker file floating around. What I would like to do is make sure that we're actually providing a Docker file so that people who are on Macs can do this, right?
Got it. Yeah, I saw the VM and I thought it was a virtual machine, but it's VMware. Sorry.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. All right, so I'm kicking that
Okay.
off right now. It's going to run one more time, probably take an hour. I can hang out in the release management channel and update as according. But fingers crossed, this should be successful next time we run it. Before we go, do we want to ask questions? Do people have questions on some of this?
Just want to say, sorry, Chris here from the release notes. First time sitting in on one of these. This was really cool. Thank you for taking the time to do this. This is awesome.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I mean, I think that, what we want to do overall is like theoretically empower anyone to do this, right? Even though they may not have the access, making sure that they actually understand how this process works end to end, right? So like here I am, SIG release chair. I don't understand all of this, right? And like that's part of the reason for this call, to make sure that like we can all get to the same place where we're like, hey, well, it would be better if we did it this way, right? And tease out improvements in this process. So thank you for coming, and thank you for the compliments and all that stuff. We're going to keep doing it because I think it seemed like it was valuable last cycle. It seems like it's valuable now. And we're kind of learning as we're going together. So thank you everyone who came to the call. Thank you everyone who's going to watch this later. I will catch y'all at the next one. All right.
Thanks, Ian. Bye.
Bye.
Thanks, man. Bye.